Good Monday morning to you, Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. It is, I say happy Monday, assuming that, like me, you're sitting at home comfortable, either because you're retired or have a flexible schedule. Who else has time to watch my videos, right? So, and really though, I didn't mind going to work on days like this. It's nice out. It would be cool enough so that the car seats weren't burning from sitting in the sun, but it was warm enough so I didn't need a jacket. Short sleeve shirts, and I generally didn't wear a tie most of the time in summer. Come September 1st, well, I had that shirt and tie, long sleeves generally, for the next 9 months. That was just the way I did it. That was my style. Both in hospice and in pastoral ministry. I've probably gotten a little more casual these days, except for Sundays when I still wear the traditional Sunday vestments. Boy, those winter mornings, so those were hard. To get up and have to go scrape a car, or even if the car was in the garage, it was still cold, and get to work and it was cold. Of course, don't have to worry about that anymore. The last couple of weeks I've been looking at Christian liberty using Martin Luther, and someone commented that I had mentioned law, the 10 Commandments, and then the expanded version, or the 613 Commandments, and they asked me to say a little more. I'm only around for 2 days this week, so I thought, well, okay, I'll spend some time looking at law. What is law? To the Hebrews, to the Jews, this was one of the foundational things, one of the cornerstones of their relationship with God. God gave them the law to shape their lives, to shape their behavior, to create a community. So the commandments, as I have said before, are both prohibitions and proscriptions and promise. Each commandment is either a you will do this or you won't do this, but then the other side of this is what a prosperous community looks like. This is how people behave. And peace and prosperity, love, mutual support are the fruits of a community shaped by that, by behavior that follows those commandments. And when I spoke of Martin Luther's second use of the law, certainly that applies, that if we respect and love the wisdom of those commandments, we build the kind of world that works for everybody. God didn't give us the commandments so that God could keep score. God gave us the commandments to benefit us, not God. God wants us to experience joy and happiness, peace and prosperity. Law, though, there's a number of words in Hebrew that all translate as law in our English Bibles. There's two of them mainly that I want to look at. I really don't want to get into a long Hebrew study, but Torah, okay, the first 5 books of the Bible are called the books of law, or the books of the Torah. And we hear of the law and the prophets, the Torah and the Nebi'im. And there's a third section called the writings. So if you think of the Old Testament, or the Jewish book Tanakh, there's 5 books of law, and then there's 12 books of these writings. They're historical, plus the Psalms, Proverbs, Songs of Solomon, Job, Esther, Ruth, those. But then we have the 5 major prophets and the 12 minor prophets that are in this section of the law of the prophets. So it's really the law of the prophets and the writings, but they will refer to the law and the prophets, and even Jesus will speak of the law and the prophets. And the word he uses when he says law and prophets would be Torah in that case, speaking of the law as the general genre of God's order, the way God shapes society. But when you talk about the 10 Commandments, these are what we would call mitzvah. These are not Torah. Mitzvah is the word that would be used here. Obey the mitzvah of God. Obey the commandments, the 10 mitzvah or the 613 mitzvah. Now, you've heard the word mitzvah before. It usually comes after the word bar or bat. Bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. Bar literally means under, or colloquially it means the son of. So think of it. A child, for instance, my friend Greg or my friend Carrie or any of the others, Bobby, they were born, Greg and Bobby were born Bar Marvin. They were under their father Marvin. Uncle Marvy, we called him. My friend Carrie's son, Aaron, I got to be at his bar mitzvah, and it was wonderful. But he was Bar Carrie, and then he became Bar Mitzvah, meaning I'm no longer under the rule of my father. I am now under the rule of mitzvah, the rule of God's commandments. There is no phase of a young Jewish child's life, a boy or a girl, the bar mitzvah for the boy, the bat mitzvah for the girl. There's no phase where they're under themselves. There is no autonomous phase. They're under the parent until about 12 or so, and then they're under the law. They are always covered. That's why sometimes Orthodox Jews will then place a head covering, the kippah, or the yarmulke, it's also called, on the head to symbolize that they're covered. They're covered by God's law. They're under God's law. They are not under the self. And I think from a Christian perspective, we would see the wisdom of that, that if we say we're autonomous and under ourselves, well, that's when we get into trouble. And Luther certainly talked about that in his treatise on Christian liberty, to where if we treat ourselves as completely free, we turn it into license very quickly. And license leads to brokenness, to sin, to damage in human relationships and everything that we touch. The Jewish reminder then for the child is, you're now under the law for the rest of your life. The law is your guide. It is your umbrella. It is God watching over you and protecting you and the community of which you are a part. Once a year then, Jews will gather. It's usually October, during what they call High Holy Days. And the end of those, they will worship on what they call the Day of Atonement, in which they acknowledge their failure over the past year to follow the mitzvah. God, we are bar mitzvah, and yet we have behaved as though we are not, as though we're under nothing, under no rule, under no authority other than our own invention, our own desires. And we ask that you forgive us, and then we ask that you rededicate us for the next year, to start over once a year. The ceremony is known as Yom Kippur, and they sing this wonderful song called the Kol Nidre. It speaks of how they desire to be bar mitzvah, that they have failed and they want to recommit themselves. Not a bad thing, really, once a year to recommit yourselves. There are some Christian denominations, in fact, where you have to go to church on Maundy, Thursday and have your feet washed. You're not a member of a congregation of the brethren, for instance. You can't be a good member in good standing unless you have your feet washed once a year. We don't really have a rededication, but in a sense, the baptism of Jesus, which is the first Sunday of the season of Epiphany, the first Sunday on or after January 6th, is often our remembrance of baptism. And one of the things I have loved to do back in the day, to take a branch from the Christmas tree, to dip it in the font. And I think I've done this at Immanuel. I think I was there once on the baptism preaching. And then take that water, just those droplets of water, and sprinkle the congregation remember that you are baptized. Remember you are a child of God. Remember you're sealed with the cross of Christ. Go and live wet. Live in remembrance of your baptism. Let your baptism be fresh in you every day. That's a look at mitzvah today. So I'll say a little bit more tomorrow then. Tomorrow I want to look specifically at the 613 mitzvah, that group of commandments. 365, thou shalt not. And 248, thou shalt. See you tomorrow.